Hi and welcome to JAX. I'm here with Dr. Jessica Barker. Hi.
Hi.
How was the keynote?
It was great.
What was the topic about?
I was talking about cybersecurity, particularly the human side of cybersecurity. So I call it myths and monsters, and I use mythology and a few movie monsters to explain the cyber threats and why it's a very human subject and what we can do to try and help people better protect themselves.
So breaches have become the new normal, if normal is the word that can be used in this situation.
Sure.
Why have there been so many breaches lately? What are we doing wrong, or what are we not doing, for example?
It's very complicated. There's many reasons. One is that our pace of technological change has moved really quickly. So we are embracing technology, which is fantastic in so many ways. It helps businesses move quickly. It helps businesses grow. As individuals, we love it to communicate. So there are many benefits to the internet and to technological change, but it does mean that we haven't thought about security as much as we've needed to. So from a technological point of view, we haven't built security in. And then from a human point of view, we've not really looked much in terms of cybersecurity as to why people behave the way they do online and how people understand threats and whether they're able to secure themselves in the way that we ask them to. So we put a lot of responsibility onto individual users to stay secure, but sometimes this can be asking people a bit too much. So we need to try and empower and encourage people and support them with their use of technology.
Speaking of that, cybersecurity seems to be like the elephant in the room, and people are afraid to talk about it. Why is that? I mean, is it the shame of getting through this, or what's the reason?
So I think there are some issues at play. One is that there can be this narrative that people are at fault. So there can sometimes be this idea that users are stupid, that people are the weakest link, and so sometimes then we can actually blame the victims and we can blame the individuals who click on a malicious link, or who reply to spear phishing emails, who put their credentials where they shouldn't. So sometimes we can point the finger a little bit too much rather than looking at the underlying causes that may have led people to being duped by a criminal. But also there is a lot of fear in general surrounding cybersecurity. So people often say the industry uses a lot of fear, uncertainty and doubt, a lot of FUD. And so people can feel that it's a very big and scary subject that also you can't find very tangible. When you are threatened in the physical world, the threat is there, you can see it, you can see somebody attacking you. Whereas online it feels sort of quite woolly and you don't really know who the attacker is or where they're coming from. So for example, from a media point of view, if a company is breached, they won't necessarily have an attacker that they can write about, so they'll write about the victim. And so this then, I'm not saying that companies aren't protecting data how they should, and sometimes they are at fault to some extent, but also they are being attacked by a criminal. And too often we can focus on the victim and do some victim blaming, which then means that other companies don't want to speak up when it happens to them.
Is raising awareness possibly part of the solution, or how can we deal with a cyber attack? Because it cannot be prevented, or
Sure.
can it?
So a lot of attacks can be prevented. A very advanced, persistent threat, somebody who really wants to hack you, it can be hard if they're willing to spend a lot of time and money and resource doing that. But most of the threat doesn't come in that way. Most of the threat will move on. If somebody tries to attack you and you have good defenses, they'll move on to somebody who is more vulnerable. So people often say we need to raise more awareness, but my research and my work in general, I've found that actually awareness is quite high. People are aware of cybersecurity, they are aware of the issues, they are aware they need better passwords, for example, they are aware of the idea of phishing emails. But what we need to look at is why then people aren't behaving as we want them to. And one of the reasons is we put too much expectation on people to protect themselves. And another is sometimes how we raise awareness. So sometimes awareness can just scare people and focus very much on the threats. And psychologically, that actually can backfire and it can lead to poorer behaviors. So how you raise awareness and the methods you use and how you empower people to be more secure online is really important.
And what can be hacked easier, let's say, people or technology?
So it's often said people are the weakest link. It is usually, not always, but usually it is cheaper and easier and quicker to get into an organization via a human. So this is why we've seen such a huge rise, for example, in spear phishing emails and in other forms of social engineering, because usually you can manipulate someone psychologically much easier than you can hack a technology or a system.
So humans make mistakes, I mean the human error, and they are kind of an easy prey.
Yeah, to some extent.
But I was thinking, should we perhaps support movements such as Human Ops, for example, which promotes the well-being of employees? And if people on the front lines perhaps are well rested and have everything that they need, perhaps they can spot something wrong that's
Absolutely.
wrong, or should we support such movements?
Yes, yeah, I completely agree with this idea, because when it comes to security, sometimes we can look very narrowly at our solutions and we can think a security problem needs a security fix, whereas often security is down to the culture. So for example, people being overworked, getting too many emails, can be a really big factor. So if you get hundreds of thousands of emails a day, you don't spend the time looking at each one, you click through them, you're far more likely to fall for a spear phishing email than if it's an organization where people talk more face to face and emails are used very lightly. So these cultural issues over how we support people, how we empower people, how we communicate are really crucial when it comes to security.
I see. That's very important. And last but not least, do you perhaps have some tips and tricks to prevent or deal with a cyber attack?
Sure. So from an organizational point of view, culture is really key. And one thing is, when you're thinking about your awareness raising training, is to really understand psychology. So most organizations, when they do awareness raising training, they will have somebody very technical designing and delivering it. And of course the technology is important, but it's crucial to bear psychology and sociology in mind. Understanding how people learn, how to best communicate with them, and how to actually change behaviors is crucial. And another key thing is to focus on a culture that doesn't blame people if they make a mistake. Because if you have a culture of fear in an organization, when somebody clicks on a link or gives away information that they shouldn't, which they inevitably will at some point, what you don't want is that they hide it. What you want is a culture where they will immediately report it, because responding to a breach is as important as trying to prevent them.
And probably going to the police, or
Yes, and this is one thing to consider before you are breached, is to make sure you have a plan. What will happen? How will we deal with it? And really crucially, to practice that plan. So everybody that's involved, from IT through to legal, HR, communications, get everyone in the room, have them look at the incident response plan and test out, if this happened, do we all know what our roles are? And for example, do we know if and when we consult the police, what kind of breach we have to report to the police or the regulators? Again, to make sure that if and when you are breached, you can respond as thoroughly and as effectively as you need to.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Lovely
you.
keynote. Thank you for the interview, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much.